Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Steve Kona. I am the president and CEO of Associated Builders and Contractors, and you are listening to Blueprints and Banter, our official podcast of ABC Florida Gulf Coast Chapter and the commercial construction industry. And today, I am joined by the chairman of the board, Mr. David Tercios. Dave, welcome.
Appreciate it, Steve. That's a very exciting intro. My name is David Tercios. I am the Vice President of TAP Operations for the Gignard Company. And as Steve mentioned, I am proud and honored to be the chairman for 2024.
We're lucky to have you, Dave.
Oh, well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Sometimes. No. So today is the very first podcast of Blueprints and Banter. Have to work on spitting that out.
I know. It doesn't really roll through the tongue off.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah.
The beauty about today's podcast is we're going to do this monthly. So we're going to bring you exciting, interesting information about the construction industry. The very first episode that we wanted to do today was let's talk about all the stuff that's happening in Washington, D.C., why it's important that contractors understand what's happening at the federal, state, local level. So today's episode is going to be called Get Into Politics or Get Out of Business. That is a term coined by ABC leaders. I think it was Joe Rogers at the time coined that phrase.
Yeah, I'm not sure his name, but I know it was decades ago. But yeah, very applicable to everything that ABC does.
Yeah, so, I spend probably 70% of my time doing government affairs at the local and state level. But today, I think it's important with what's going on in Washington, D.C., all of the different types of mandates that are coming down from the federal government. I am happy to introduce our very first guest of the show. We'd like to welcome Ben Brubeck. Ben is the Vice President of Regulatory Labor and State Affairs for ABC National. Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Great to be with you guys. It's an honor to be with you on your first podcast.
Yeah, so we're working out some kinks today, but Ben, talk about, there's a lot of things going on, obviously, with the Biden administration, lots of executive orders. You want to just give us kind of the lay of the land, what's happening legislatively, and then we'll hit on some of the issues that, some of the real problem areas that we're seeing from a contractor perspective.
Yeah, well, thanks again. I've been with ABC for almost 20 years and doing government affairs in various positions here. And I've really never seen a marketplace like this right now in terms of it being a perfect storm of demographics and economics and bad public policy that's sort of leading to a lot of concern for our members across the country, especially our members who do public work, government work with the state, local, or federal government. And the skilled labor shortage was always been a big factor for a lot of our members, even before the COVID scare. Obviously, our skilled labor shortage estimate for 2024 is about 500,000 people again. So, it hasn't gone away. Baby boomers are retiring at a greater rate than the new people into the industry. And we're doing all we can to recruit new entrants into the industry by using, an all of the above workforce development strategy. And that includes government registered apprenticeship programs and employer upskilling and working with our local career and technical colleges and education systems. So there's lots going on there. But the thing is just there's hundreds of billions of dollars of increased government investment thanks to the infrastructure bill, the CHIPS Act, the ARPA bill that were all passed during the Biden administration. A lot of that money really isn't in the market yet. There's some projects that have been announced, but groundbreaking really hasn't happened. And a lot of states and local governments are getting that money. They're in the pre-planning and the procurement phases of these projects. So the labor shortage pinch, I think, is going to get actually a little bit worse next year once a lot of these projects are actually, in the physical construction phases of the project. At the same time, we're seeing a lot of economic uncertainty and some softening in some of these construction industry segments, as well as some geographic markets. But we were coming off this red hot market once the pandemic cooled things off and injected a lot of uncertainty and disrupted our supply chain. So, another thing I hear a lot about across the country is just the cost of materials. We are experiencing a 40% cost increase in materials since the start of the pandemic. Some of these have come down a little bit, but the high prices seem like they're here to stay. Of course, that's affecting government budgets along with the labor shortage. And then, of course, the interest rates. They're higher in a lot of markets because of the Fed rates, but that's obviously making some of these private projects a little bit less attractive to build in the commercial sector and other areas too. And then, of course, we're facing all of these new Biden administration regulations that are increasing the cost of projects, They're delaying permitting. They're exacerbating the skilled labor shortage, and they're steering contracts to unionized contractors and union labor who compose just less than 11% of the construction industry. So all this means taxpayers are getting, they're not getting the best return on their investment in infrastructure. And that's very concerning. And we'll talk more about some of these policies, but this president and this administration broadly are the most pro-union folks in the White House I've ever seen. And historically, they want to be the most pro-union administration ever. And you'll see that reflected in the policies that we're looking at ABC, and we're trying to make better, or we're fighting in the courts, or working on legislation to fight.
So, Ben, it's funny that you mentioned all of this because, Biden did say, he wants to be the most pro-union president. Florida, we're a right-to-work state. We don't, 97% of our workforce is not tied to a labor union. The majority of our contractors, the vast majority, almost all of them, are non-union. And he's giving out all these gifts to union companies as far as federal contracts go. But quite honestly, he's actually losing union membership during his time as president. So let's talk about this one thing, because I think a lot of folks, a lot of contractors in Florida really haven't had to deal with any of this type of thing. But now we have a big Air Force base here. We have big VA hospitals here in the region. Talk about this executive order 14063 that requires PLAs on projects over $35 million. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and maybe how we could stop it?
Yeah, sure. So your audience may not be aware of this, but the Biden administration just finalized the rule that's effective January 22nd, so just last week, that requires project labor agreements on federal construction projects of $35 million or more. Federal projects are military projects, GSA projects, VA projects, projects procured directly by a government entity, being a federal government entity, not a federally assisted project that would be procured by a state or local government getting some federal dollars. But this actually follows the FAR. And what they're doing is they're requiring project labor agreements. There might be folks who can't spell PLA down in Florida. God bless you. And if you don't know what a PLA is, it basically forces contractors to use most or all of their employees from union hiring halls, and you can't use your existing workforce. You're forced to pay into union pension and benefits plans that can expose you to multi-employer pension plan liability, and you may have existing plans you want to keep, so there's some double pension benefit costs there. You got to follow union work rules, and then any of your workers who are allowed to work on a PLA project, which is probably 1 out of 10 if you're lucky, those workers have to have all of their money paid into these union plans, and they'll lose all that money contributed into those plans unless they vest and join a union, even in a right-to-work state. So there's a lot of reasons why these PLAs don't make sense for merit shop or open shop contractors. And our members across the country have done more than 50% of all the large-scale federal contracts since 2009. So what the order is effectively doing is it's saying, hey, federal agencies, we want you to require a project labor agreement on this federal contract of $35 million or more. In fact, you can even require it on projects less than that $35 million threshold, but you have to do it on projects over $35 million. There are some minor exceptions that we're looking at. We'll see how those are used, in the real world, but there are some minor exceptions permitting agencies to waive the PLA requirement. But we think this is going to be just a huge disaster for the Biden administration, because the contracting officers in these federal agencies really have a difficult time exempting these projects from PLA requirements, and they're not going to get enough competition from non-union contractors and non-union labor. Like I just said, we have a skilled labor shortage right now. This policy is basically going to ensure there is a skilled labor shortage by knocking out, the vast majority of the construction industry who's not union. And also, we know that these PLA requirements increase the cost of construction between 12% and 20%. That's because of a lack of competition. It's because of the union work rules and the pension requirements and all these things like that in typical PLAs. So that again is going to undermine, finite budgets that we have in the military and with the VA and GSA and all these federal agencies. So this is a big deal for our membership who do federal work, federal contractors. Also, independent of this executive order, the Biden administration is pushing PLAs on federally assisted projects through grant programs their federal agencies are administering, and they're telling state and local governments, we want you to apply for this federal money. It's going to help with your infrastructure project. But if you're more likely to get the funding if you say you're going to require a PLA. Thankfully, in Florida, y'all passed laws, Fair and Open Competition Act type of laws that restrict government mandated PLAs. So you kind of have this insurance policy against that push at the federal level. But that doesn't help with federal contracts like stuff at MacDill Air Force Base, for example. And we're already seeing threats of PLAs on those projects. And so, I know you'll be mobilizing your membership to fight back against that with our help at ABC National.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think we're going to need to fight that any way we can.
Yeah.
And if,
as you mentioned, Ben, this isn't the first executive order that has been executed over the past 3 years. This is just the latest one. Can you talk a little bit about Europe and DC? Can you talk a little bit about what ABC has been doing to kind of push back on those and fighting for our members?
Yeah, so the Obama administration actually put out an executive order that encouraged federal agencies to require PLAs. Thankfully, it wasn't a direct mandate like this Biden order. And we spent basically since 2009, a lot of energy, a lot of time making sure our members had an opportunity to bid and build federal contracts over $25 million, which was the threshold under Obama. And we were wildly successful. There were only 12 PLAs on almost 3,500 contracts that were subject to PLAs. So, that's a great batting average. And we created this marketplace for our members to win, and our members won more than 50% of those projects. So really good success story. Unfortunately, we're kind of a victim of our own success. The Biden administration's like, whoa, wait a minute. We want to make sure this is as airtight as possible against litigation, as well as making sure that PLAs are required. And so we're doing a lot to fight back at this. We're ready to file litigation against this when we find an appropriate project. We're educating the federal contractor base about this. We just had a webinar about it last week, if your members want to check it out on our archive page. And then we're doing a lot of work on Capitol Hill and with the governors too, to make sure they understand the stakes and what's happening. It's amazing. There's a lot of people in Congress that still don't understand what the Biden administration is doing related to just broadly favoring unions with every policy possible. So this is part of our message too. But for those members of Congress with projects in their backyard that are going to go union and make sure that, contractors and labor from Philadelphia are going to come build their projects, say in Florida, they're upset about this. I mean, they're very nervous about this in the sense that this is very disruptive for their local businesses and workers, and they want to push back. There's a legislative solution to this issue called the Fair and Open Competition Act that we're supporting. We've got more than 100 co-sponsors in the House and about 30 in the Senate. In the House, it was introduced by Congressman Comer, who's the chair of the Oversight Committee that holds the administration accountable, as well as government contracting is something that's in their wheelhouse too. So he's been very helpful pushing back on this. And then in the Senate, Senator Todd Young from Indiana has got the bill. So we've been asking members to participate in the grassroots, to get their federal members of Congress to support this Fair and Open Competition Act measure, and also push back on Biden administration's pro-PLA policies. And your members may not know this, but we have something called the ABC Action app, which you can download on their iTunes store or for all your different phones. The Android as well. And you can actually just sign up and then send a letter to the Biden administration and your member of Congress with 1 or 2 clicks. So if you haven't downloaded that, it's a great way to get engaged. And as we say, get into politics or get out of business. And this is the easiest way for your company members and their employees to really get engaged and push back on stuff like this.
Yeah, we will definitely promote the app later in this podcast.
Yeah, no, definitely. And as you mentioned last week, there was a call to action for everyone who had that ABC Action app, and it was a very simple click 2 things, and 3 emails went out to federal officials in my area. So
Ben,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
No, I was just going to say, and on top of the grassroots within our organization, we're trying to get other construction groups and taxpayer groups involved too. I'm one of the leaders of a coalition called Build America Local. We launched a website to push back on PLAs and legislation during the infrastructure bill kind of making its way through Congress, and we were successful. www.buildamericalocal.com is that website. It's a great resource for information about PLAs and whatnot. And there's probably about 25 groups that are in the construction industry or business groups that are with us. And then there's another 12 or so pro-taxpayer groups that are also working on this issue too, independent of us. So we've got a decent sized coalition pushing back on this and other types of things. But we're really laser focused on PLAs. This is one of our core issues.
Yeah, well, if PLAs wasn't enough, we are, as far as ABC, between the Gulf Coast chapter and the Florida East Coast chapter, we're the largest providers of apprenticeship training in the state. So we're training thousands of apprentices in 10, 11 different trades. But this administration is coming down and trying to rewrite what apprenticeship looks like at the federal level. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's something I've been working on and breathing a lot in the last month or so. And in case you missed it, there's sort of a under the radar pre-Christmas proposed rule issued by the Department of Labor that just hit the Federal Register, and it's really trying to overhaul the Federal Registered apprenticeship system, and this will affect both all the states that have their own programs, whether under the federal system or under their own system. The way I read this, and it's a huge rule, it's about 600 pages long. So it's some fun reading, but that's why we're here at ABC National to help, digest these regulations and help get you engaged in the rulemaking process. And by the way, tomorrow there'll be a webinar for ABC members, and if they miss it, it'll be archived, where myself and Maury Baskin, our general counsel, are going to be talking about the changes to this and how it'll affect chapters like you, as well as members who have their own apprenticeship programs. For listeners who may not be familiar with the registered apprenticeship system, it's governed by the Department of Labor broadly, and then if you have your own apprenticeship programs approved by the state, they have to follow those federal guidelines. And so this totally changes what that looks like. ABC chapters offer more than 450 government registered apprenticeship programs across the country. And then our members have, hundreds or thousands of apprenticeship programs that they run themselves. So this is significant, and the public has until March 18th to respond to the proposed rule, and we'll be helping orchestrate that response. But the way I read this huge rule is that it makes it much more difficult for employers and existing apprenticeship program providers to move forward without incurring a ton of extra red tape, extra costs, extra reporting. Also, there's some union favoritism language in here as well that'll make it difficult for new programs to get approved. I can see this being used as a way for unions to harass, non-union registered apprenticeship programs. And ultimately, this is problematic for taxpayers and for the public, because we are providing, the non-union programs are providing about 25% of all government registered apprentices across the country. It's certainly not the majority, but it's a sizable amount. We have such a big skilled labor shortage. The unions and the Biden administration want to make these programs run by unions exclusively, but they can't legally do that. So they're adding all these little provisions here and there to make it much harder for the non-union apprenticeship programs to participate. And that's really too bad, because it's not just about ABC's programs, it's about the entire non-union industries programs, which include, career and technical education providers and other folks that you're familiar with that are engaged in this space.
Yeah, and in Florida, the majority of our programs are a non-union. So, I guess it's state by state, but hearing, the amount that are actually federally locked in at 25% being non-union, there's a better case study in some of the states where the majority of the programs are definitely non-union. So it's going to be a challenge. So we'll be looking at that. Last thing I want to hit on with you, Ben, before you head out, is let's talk about the independent contractor ruling. That obviously from the federal government, the regulators are just out doing things that make it very difficult to do business. So you want to talk about that one real quick?
Yeah, Department of Labor has issued their new rule, really trying to clamp down on independent contractors. Again, the goal of this effort is to try to make people less likely to engage in what they call freelancing or independent contracting. They want to go back to a test and a bunch of steps that are really complicated for the average person to understand. We challenged a similar effort that was put in place by the Obama administration. Trump ended up rescinding that and then putting in place his own rule. And the Biden administration came and tried to quickly undo the Trump rule. They sort of missed a few steps in that regulatory process. ABC filed a lawsuit and challenged them on that and won. So here we are, in the fourth year of the Biden administration, they finally put this rule out. We've renewed our litigation that we already had in place against that rule, saying that they violated various steps in the Administrative Procedures Act. But outside of all that inside baseball, we think that the Trump administration's independent contractor test was really a simple formula for the average contractor and average person to understand, and provided clarity that the regulated community needed. The Biden administration is trying to make it a lot more complicated, which will benefit the trial lawyers and the unions and everyone else who wants to try to go after independent contractors that are legitimate. There are illegitimate, independent contractors that I think that this rule is trying to target, and I understand that in our industry. but they're also kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater and making this a lot more difficult for the average person to understand, and effectively eliminating independent contractor work in the construction industry. Lots of other industries are having the same complaints about it. You know, the media is talking about Uber and Lyft and everyone, but it's not just them. It's the moms and dads who have their own small businesses that they're working for multiple clients. They're affected by this too. And it's a large portion of our workforce in America that's gone independent contractor that this is going to totally disrupt. I think it's going to be a sneaky big issue for the election, moving swing voters one way or the other.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, Ben, I mean, that is a lot to deal with in a very short period of time. We appreciate you taking the time, and we appreciate everything that you and ABC National and our government affairs team, you guys are top notch. Anything that we can help with and our members can help with, we're going to be there for you. So how can people get a hold of you if they need to?
Yeah, best way if you want to reach out to me is send me an email at brubeck@abc.org. If you're on Twitter, we're posting stuff constantly. It's at ABC Gov Affairs. ABC Action App is also a great way to directly engage in some of the key things we're worried about. Plus, 2024 is an election year, so we're going to be doing a lot in that space. Get into politics, get out of business. We'll be doing a lot of stuff upcoming throughout the year: voter education, industry education. And hopefully candidates will listen to what we're trying to explain to them, and we'll get some pro-merit shop candidates elected into the House and the Senate and the White House that can undo a lot of this and protect free enterprise. And that's what we're here about. So
yeah, for sure.
Appreciate you getting that message out.
You bet. Thanks, Ben. We appreciate your time today.
Thanks a lot, Ben. Stay warm up there.
Yeah.
Well, that was pretty good.
There's a whole lot of information that he shared with us. And
scary stuff, right?
It's very scary stuff. And I think it's really important to make sure that we touch base on a couple things. Mm-hmm. Once again, almost 90% of the construction workforce in this country is not associated with a union. So that means it's excluding 90% of the contractors in this country from bidding or even trying to go after this work without a PLA in place. Right. So it's head scratching to me how something like this is. I mean, it's passed already. I don't know how there's not more resistance from all of the elected officials up in DC. I also think it's important to point out that, a lot of times I think ABC gets the rap that we're anti-unions, and that's not the case. We have no problem with unions, anything they want to do. Our problem is with these kinds of laws that are being passed that excludes 90% of the entire workforce in this country.
Yeah, and that's what gets me. So I go to these public meetings and they're like, "Oh, Steve Kona is anti-union." I'm like, yeah. That could be that could be the farthest from the truth.
Sure.
We are not going out, promoting policies that eliminate unions from bidding on projects.
That's correct.
It's the exact opposite on their behalf, which is crazy.
Everything. I mean, we were just in Tallahassee last week advocating for ABC of Florida and, statewide politics, which is a little bit different. But nothing that we're trying to push is carving out something that's specifically for non-union contractors.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about the process if we could. But before we do that, Dave.
Yes.
We do have sponsors of this amazing show, and I want to highlight them.
Yeah.
We have four Diamond Advantage Club sponsors for the first time this year, and they are going to be sponsors throughout the year for this podcast. Callista Cabinets, Ginyard Company, Milwaukee Tool, and Piper Fire Protection.
Yep. So no, it's fantastic, and I can only speak obviously for the Ginyard portion of the sponsorship. We're happy to support obviously ABC, but not just ABC, the whole construction industry. So to us, it's money very well spent, and we're happy to be a Diamond sponsor this year.
Well, we appreciate you. So let's talk about how we get to this phase of making sure that we elect the right people who understand the importance of the construction industry. Do you want to talk a little bit about how our chapter goes about it, since you're the PAC chair of our
yeah, I'm happy to. So
chair.
Yeah. So it's honestly it's somewhat of a painstaking process in that we at our chapter office we interview every candidate that is running for office in our area, not just on the federal level but the state level and even the local level. So it's over a 3-4 year period that we invite everyone who's running for office to come into the office, and not only do we ask them questions about why they're running and what their points are for running, but we make sure we take that opportunity to educate them on ABC and why we exist and exactly what it is we're fighting for. It's a little surprising, and again, it's because that information is out there. So many of them think that before they walk in our office that we're an anti-union operation, and once again, we're not.
Yeah, I mean, we are the majority of the construction industry. So whatever's best for the construction industry, that is what we are for. So,
Definitely.
we find ourselves in a very interesting time because statewide, we have pretty much people who understand construction elected at the state house. That doesn't happen locally, right? So we have local governments seem to be a little bit of a kind of hard to attract because there's local governments, they have nonpartisan seats, they have folks that are Democrats and Republicans, and we do our best to educate them all.
Yeah, it's funny you say the nonpartisan part because that's another thing that is important to understand. ABC is a nonpartisan body. We line and we support those that are business minded, if you will, and those that have who are okay with letting construction companies and other companies do what they do best and not add more red tape to the process.
Yeah, and that's the key. So battling that red tape is pretty much the bane of my existence as a chapter president at ABC.
Yeah, and as you said, unfortunately, there seems to be more of that in local governments than there does on the state and federal level. But Ben fights it for ABC on the national level. He and his great team up there in DC.
Yeah. All right, so this is the first podcast. Anything else we want to add to this? Because I know we have some hot topics coming up later in the year. It's going to be an election year. We're going to talk way more than just politics on this show.
Are we talking football?
Huh?
Are we talking football or no?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit of football. So Dave is so happy today that he is a 49er fan.
I am.
And Lions lost in spectacular fashion yesterday. Thank goodness for you.
They did. Yeah, and I as I was telling you, I can't really blame. I can't claim victory there. More so, it was handed to us. But I'll take it. Whatever. We have a chance to add a sixth title in San Francisco. So we'll see.
Yeah, but you have to battle Taylor Swift and the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, luckily she won't be there, so maybe Travis won't be so gung-ho in performing that day. We'll see.
Yeah, well, that was I know the first half of that game you were probably a little scared.
A little bit
scared. And then the Lions decided to be the Lions.
Yeah.
And
it was Christmas for us.
It was Christmas. So what else is coming up that we need to talk about, you think?
Well, for ABC members, we do have the membership appreciation coming up in a couple of weeks, and that's going to be at Rick's on the River.
Okay.
It's a great time. It's free for members to attend. Great atmosphere, and we should have some nice weather for the event, too.
Yeah, so if you are interested in membership with ABC, if you are not a member and you would like to be, go to www.abcflgulf.org and reach out to us. We'll be happy to get you involved in this association. We are the voice of commercial construction, and we invite you to join our membership. We are 620 member companies strong, and we're growing. If you are a member and you haven't renewed your membership yet,
we have renewed, so we're good there.
yeah, you have.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, and you paid your sponsorship.
We did.
Better.
We're ahead of the game.
So renew your membership. There's a lot of exciting things happening this year. Lots of exciting events. This is a relationship business, the construction industry. So the best way to build those relationships is with ABC. We appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed listening to our very first podcast. We encourage you to subscribe to our website, leave a review, share this podcast. This is very important information that we shared today. And we're going to continue to have all sorts of different topics on blueprints and banter. So thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Great job, Steve.
Thanks, buddy.